All right, welcome back. I'm Chris Bedford of Blaze News, in for Vince Colonnese at The Vince Show. You can follow me on Twitter at CBedfordDC and sign up for my newsletter, The Beltway Brief, at theblaze.com/Bedford. Next, we are joined by the great Mike Davis. You can follow him. He's a fantastic and truly hysterical and informative tweeter at Mr. DDMIA. Now, Mike Davis has had a really fantastic career. He was a chief counsel for nominations in a previous life, the Senate Judiciary Committee. He law clerked for Justice Gorsuch, and now he leads the Article 3 project. He has decided that he would rather, at this moment in time, throw bombs and try to really make a lot of noise outside the administration as opposed to be on the inside, and he has done some excellent work. Last night, you might have seen this somewhere circling on X, but he hosted an event at Butterworth's to celebrate the Senate confirmation of Judge Emil Bove, who's just going to be absolutely fantastic. The Democrats fought this tooth and nail, and even outside, those same people who were angry that Sydney Sweeney is in an advertisement were out there screaming on megaphones trying to ruin the fun time, but they couldn't. Mike, thanks for joining.
Thank you for having me, Chris.
So, how was that? I saw the greeting you gave to those screamers and yellers and uglies outside of the event last night. It didn't seem like you were intimidated, but tell us about this fantastic event you hosted and why you were celebrating.
Yeah, the Article 3 project hosted over 200 people to celebrate the Senate confirmation of new Trump 47 federal appellate judge Emil Bove, who is a bold and fearless warrior for the Constitution. Emil Bove has fought for years for the Constitution. He was a federal prosecutor in the Southern District of New York who put terrorists away and violent criminals away. He represented President Trump with Todd Blanche, the Deputy Attorney General, as his law partner for President Trump's unprecedented Republic-ending lawfare that Joe Biden put President Trump through. Emil Bove has been the senior Justice Department official who's been cleaning out the politicized and weaponized Justice Department, including the FBI. Emil was the tip of the spear in all this. He was he led the Justice Department during the transition before Pam Bondi got confirmed and Todd Blanche got confirmed. He's the number 2 to Todd Blanche. Now he's going to be a federal appellate judge fighting for the Constitution every day for the rest of his life. And as I told the opponents, the vicious opponents of President Trump and Judge Emil Bove, they can call Emil Judge or Your Honor for the rest of his life.
That's fantastic. And for those folks who haven't memorized the Constitution, the Article 3, which the organization is named, is what establishes the judicial branch of the federal government. And it's absolutely essential. But the executive branch also plays a big role in interacting with that through the appointment of U.S. attorneys. And, Mike, earlier in the show, we were talking about how not a single U.S. attorney has yet been confirmed, like the great judge, by the Senate to be able to carry out the president's agenda, to be able to actually enforce the law, to be able to make sure that these years of insanity we had to deal with under Biden with the U.S. attorneys is at an end. You've worked on judicial nominations. You've worked inside the Senate. You've been in the inside. You've been in the outside. You know how it works. You know that Senator Grassley is doing everything he can here. There's some norms and decorum he's going to try and maintain because they are important, like the blue slip, for example, that allows us, if you're living in Arkansas, to not be governed by judges who are better suited for Manhattan, to be able to, for state senators to be able to defend you. But what is going on? What is the holdup in the U.S. Senate on being able to get these U.S. attorneys into place?
Well, how it usually works, Chris, is I was the chief counsel for nominations for Chairman Chuck Grassley on the Senate Judiciary Committee for the first 2 years of President Trump's first term, and you're seeing unprecedented obstruction by these Senate Democrats. But they used to let U.S. attorneys get through without requiring roll call votes on the Senate Judiciary Committee and 2 roll call votes on the Senate foreclosure vote, confirmation vote. These votes take a lot of time, right? These Democrats are mindlessly obstructing every U.S. attorney pick by President Trump. And some of it, you talked about the blue slip. That's not a Senator Chuck Grassley problem. That's a broader Senate problem. These senators will not, on a bipartisan basis, they will not vote to confirm U.S. attorneys, U.S. marshals, and district court judges that don't have the support from both home state senators, called the blue slip process that we've had for over 100 years. I don't like the process. I think it leads to unnecessary obstruction of the president's agenda. The president has a hard time picking U.S. attorneys in key cities like New York and L.A. and Chicago and Boston and other blue states around the country. I pushed as hard as I could. I broke every piece of china in the Senate when I helped President Trump confirm his judges and Justice Department officials, including U.S. attorneys, during his first 2 years of his first term. But I'm telling you what, the blue slip for U.S. attorney, U.S. district court judge, U.S. marshal is not going away. That is the sacred china of the Senate that is unbreakable, no matter how hard we try. But separate from that, there are U.S. attorney nominees who are on the Senate floor, like Judge Jeanine Pirro in Washington, D.C., like Jason Redding Quinones down in Miami, several others, including even in blue states like Minnesota and Virginia. I hope that Thune will be able to come to a deal with Democrats to get these U.S. attorneys passed and confirmed through before the August recess, the high holy month of August recess in Washington. But if they don't, I hope Senate Majority Leader John Thune can convince his Republican colleagues to stay in session in August until we can get the backlog of close to 120 of these nominees across the Trump administration confirmed. The president needs his team, and they need to stay in session to confirm the president's team.
You know, we were talking about potential attorney nominee Pirro here earlier in D.C., and Judge Quinones down in the Southern District for Florida, because that's Mar-a-Lago, and that's Washington, D.C., and that's where you're going to end up wanting to prosecute so much of this Russiagate conspiracy. And just to keep listeners up to date on why this stuff is important, for example, when they were going after Hunter Biden, and you had the Delaware U.S. attorney who was supposedly given carte blanche to be able to pursue these charges in the investigation, well, he had to rely on Biden attorneys in California and in Washington to get the information he needed. And they slow-walked and slow-walked and slow-walked on behalf of the president until things were out of the statute of limitations, tried to do everything they could to make the job harder. So having the right people in these posts is absolutely necessary. And you talked about breaking some of the china in the Senate. What are some of the options Senator Thune people have talked about, I've written about at the Beltway Brief, trying to do recess appointments and at least giving the president the ability to have his nominees until January 2027. Or Thune has talked about getting rid of cutting the cloture debate time in half, or being able to package nominees together into groups, especially some of the more junior nominees, or removing some of them from actual Senate purview. Which of those ideas do you actually see as plausible in kind of a behind the times, as always, older, more liberal Republican U.S. Senate that in reality this White House has to deal with? Which of these norms can be pushed to make the Democrats' historic obstruction finally crack?
I would say none of the above, because it's a lot simpler than that, Chris. All you have to do is merely threaten to make these senators work past 2 p.m. on Thursday. It's the mere threat of making them work past 2 p.m. on Thursday where they cave and start confirming these nominees. I always say law resistance could not resist long weekends. We need to end the Senate's French work week. They work 2.5 days a week, and then they go home and sleep, apparently. We need to end recess, August recess, the high holy month of August recess. Recess is for kids. And I used to do this when I was on the Senate Judiciary Committee, but this requires that all Senate Republicans get on board with this, because if the Senate Republicans say, screw it, I don't want to work past 2 p.m. on Thursday, and then we lose those votes, then Senate Majority Leader John Thune loses his leverage. Scott Grassley, my former boss, is the all-star of Congress for President Trump. President Trump sometimes forgets this, as we saw with his truth post yesterday, where he was just mind-bogglingly criticizing Senator Grassley. But it's Senator Grassley who has delivered constantly for President Trump. President Trump's biggest accomplishments of his first term and his second term, the Supreme Court transformation, the lower federal court transformation, taxes, trade, criminal justice reform, other key legislation. It is Senator Grassley who delivers. Senator Grassley is a workhorse. He's not a show horse. And other senators can get in the mold of Chuck Grassley and actually work. And God forbid they have to work on a Friday or even a Saturday or a Sunday until the backlog of these nominees by President Trump start getting through the Senate. So instead of crying about blue slips, let's just get senators to confirm these nominees who are already through the Senate Judiciary Committee process and are sitting on the floor waiting for confirmation, like Judge Jeanine Pirro in D.C. and Jason Redding Quinones in the Southern District of Florida and Miami, and over 120 other nominees. The Senate Republicans just need to work. That's it. That's how you solve this problem.
And I know they're eager to get back and talk to people about the big, beautiful bill. And I remember that in 2017, you broke the Democrats at the beginning of the August recess because they didn't want to stay. So now you got Majority Leader Thune, who has said, we're staying. We're working tonight. We're working tomorrow. We're going to work into the weekend. No one's going home. We're going to try and get this done. But you're also dealing with the Democratic Party with people like Cory Booker, who are out there. They're not attending the committee hearings. They're ticking off their own colleagues, like Amy Klobuchar, by not attending and then still jamming up the logworks on bipartisan bills because the Twitter resistance, the Blue Sky resistance, the MSNBC resistance is all they seem to care about. That seems to have gotten worse, even since the first administration. Is that something you think is permanent or something you think really does break if they just say, there's no more recess. August stinks in Washington, D.C., but you're here for it, and we're going to stick to it. And what has changed so much in the Democrats that they've found what appears to be, and it might just be paper tiger, what appears to be a newfound sense of complete obstruction. It's been getting worse since George W. Bush.
Well, they want to obstruct because they know they can. But look, if Senate Republicans just stick together, we just need 50 Senate Republicans plus the vice president's vote, and we can confirm any of these nominees. The Senate Republicans just need to end their French work week and recesses for kids. If they go in with that mindset, while resistance cannot resist long weekends, right? We can confirm all of these nominees immediately. I guarantee you, when I was there, if I just threatened to make these Senate Democrats work on a Friday, they would confirm judges. They would confirm U.S. attorneys. Just make the threat. But in order for Thune to make that threat, it has to be credible. That means that at least 50 Senate Republicans have to be willing to stay on a Friday to do this. Otherwise, it is an idle threat, and the Democrats know this. This is why, if you go to Article3Project.org, Article number 3Project.org, and take action, one of the action items is to push senators to work weekends and during recess to confirm President Trump's nominees.
Mike Davis at the Article 3 Project, a veteran of the latest many nights battles of Butterworth, which you can read about Butterworth, by the way, in Frontier Magazine from Blaze News. I wrote a profile, one of the hundreds, but one of the best. And someone who's been working really hard at this. You can follow him on Twitter at Mr. DDMIA. Mike, thank you for taking a break to join us and walk us through this pretty dense but important process.
Thank you, Chris.